Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/getstarted. That's GREENLIGHT.com/getstarted.
For me, though, it was Rakakuni. I love the dildo and butt plug fights, though. They were good, but Rakakuni was outstanding.
Let me out of here. I told you not until I get all the hair off.
Ow,
you.
stop.
Stay still,
No,
and
I will not.
hurt.
Let me out of the cage.
Guys, what's happening now?
Thank you, Cecil. Can you tell him to let me out?
Let him out. See? Did that help? It didn't help.
Okay.
Eli, what the hell are you doing?
Well, Noah, I went out into the vacant lot behind the studio so I could help with this week's episode.
Piltdown Man?
Exactly. I know that in order to have enough down, we had to catch a bunch of pilts, right?
Who did what now? What the who?
I needed pilts to get their down so we could make a human effigy out of Piltdown. So I built a cage, put some cheese in there, waited, and voila. Now I just have to harvest the down and we're all set.
That's Heath in there, man. And you could still just look up what we're going to talk about instead of like guessing every week.
Heath, did you just walk into a cage with cheese in it again?
Yes, I might have.
Eli, that's Heath in there. That is not a pilt. Whatever the hell you think that is.
No, you know what? I see it now. He is too tall to be a pilt.
Well, it could be Pilt Chamberlain. Pilt.
You're not helping.
Chamberlain.
Cecil.
That's really good, though.
But let me out.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts. Because this is the internet, and that's how it works now. Step right up and see the oddities of nature. We have a drop bear, a jackalope, a Nessie, and a Chupacabra. I'll let you sort out which is which.
Shotgun Chupacabra. That's me.
Potato Famine, the Irishman. Sorry, what are we doing? I thought we were fighting.
Yeah, shotgun might not be the best phrase. I guess I have to take Nessie now so that we won't all have to pretend Tom has a neck.
Okay, Noah. Jesus. I have a neck, Noah. It's why I have to give my shirts custom made.
In Noah's face. Nice.
Don't you feel stupid?
Patrons, without you, Eli would have to go back to his old job of painting lips on his belly button and wearing a top hat over the rest of his torso. No one needs to see that, man. Nobody needs to see that. If you'd like to learn how to prevent that terrible image I painted from becoming a reality, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Noah, what person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about Piltdown Man.
Almost everyone on the cast knows Piltdown Man was a hoax. How big a hoax was it, Noah?
All right, so Piltdown Man is probably the most notorious hoax in the history of science. You might recall that when I did the Cardiff Giant on episode 247, I said that it was my second favorite fake human remains story, and that's because I knew I needed to leave space for this motherfucker.
Right. And Tom had room for the story of Carl Tanzler.
Okay,
and
that's a
corpse
good
bride fuck doll.
Right?
Carl Tanzler.
And of course, Cecil will only let me do my favorite human remains story at Platinum Night. So it works
Okay,
out.
there you go.
Is what we're
Okay.
saying.
So Piltdown Man was a hypothesis concocted from a series of fake fossils, discovered by fake archaeologist Charles Dawson back in the early 20th century. And because it catered to the national, racial, and scientific prejudices of its day, it was widely accepted as real, and the fact that it was a mediocre forgery wasn't definitively proven for over 40 years.
Texas textbook makers left it in because it makes kids feel good about racism. Makes them feel just warm.
Yeah. We're still doing that, yeah. So Our story starts in 1912 when amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson claims that he's discovered evidence of a missing link between ape and man in a Pleistocene gravel bed in East Sussex. Or more specifically, he claimed that he had been given said evidence by a workman who discovered it, and on the initial assumption that it must have been a fossilized coconut broken open.
What?
Yeah, so this origin story is the first of many red flags that should have warned Dawson's contemporaries that something might be amiss here. Consider the kind of stupidity that you have to assume on the part of the workman to have him looking at a hominid skull and going, was that some kind of coconut? And then realize that it's like a broken skull is way more useful to a hoaxer who might want to reassemble it in some new way or leave out some part that wouldn't fit with his story.
That's not a horse. You're just banging hominid skulls together.
I mean, you grip it by the husk. To be fair, Noah, if the thought nobody's that stupid had crossed Dawson's mind, we wouldn't have a story this evening. So
No, you're right. You're right.
I just have to return to a wild, laying around, fossilized coconut
Yes.
in East Sussex,
in
England.
That
was your
There's a
first
whole bit
assumption?
in a Monty Python about this.
But regardless of the fossil's questionable chain of custody, the skull fragments were enough to get the attention of the head of the British Museum's geology department, Arthur Smith Woodward. Woodward accompanied Dawson on a number of excavations on the same site in the coming months, and together they discovered several more skull fragments, including a few teeth and part of a lower jaw. Or rather, sorry, they didn't discover those together. Dawson came upon those things while digging by himself in between their team digs. So, yeah, there's another red flag for you there.
All right, everybody close your eyes. If you happen to have a fossil of anything important, you can put it on my desk. No questions asked.
Okay, but to be fair, if Dawson hadn't discovered the fossil pieces, the British Museum would have had nobody to steal them from. These places have processes, Noah. They have to...
Right. No, exactly. So when Woodward put all the pieces together, he wound up with a very odd specimen. According to his reconstruction, the discovery was of a hominid with room for a modern human-sized brain, but a decidedly ape-like jaw. In fact, in the meeting of the Geological Society of London where he announced the discovery, Woodward said that the jawbone was, with the exception of a couple of human-like molars, indistinguishable from that of a young chimpanzee. Which, to his credit, was correct because it was the fossil of a young chimpanzee jaw with a couple of the teeth filed down to look more human-y. But they didn't realize that at the time, and the scientific community welcomed Eanthropus dawsoni to humanity's family tree.
Chimpanzee Dennis just has a price chart with bananas on the wall of his practice there.
Now, to be fair, this story is often sold as the entire scientific community marching in lockstep around this discovery, and that's not a fair characterization. A lot of authorities rejected Woodward's reconstruction of the skull from the very beginning. Right, the Royal College of Surgeons did their own reconstruction and came up with a much different conclusion, as did several prominent voices in the wider field of anthropology.
But sadly, these dissenters had no Joe Rogan podcast to platform them, so they were silent.
Yep, that was it. But skepticism or no, we've discovered the missing link is a way better headline than "we found a weird-looking dude," so the press pushed for the former. And to be fair, the majority of the scientific establishment followed along. And one of the main reasons was that it was exactly what scientists expected to find next. Right? The prevailing theory at the time was that the human species branched off from apes first by developing a much larger brain and then by losing all of our ape-like features. We now know that the truth is pretty much the exact opposite of that, but the scientists of the day were by and large being shown what they wanted to be shown.
Okay, wouldn't it have to be the exact opposite of that? Like, I'm not saying I would have figured this out. I wouldn't have figured out evolution correctly if I was a scientist back then, but that's a weird assumption. Like, all the apes started just doing math Olympiads and fucking Sudokus, and their brain, they were like, brain really big, skull got bigger, and then they were like, hey, we can probably, I don't know, lose the fur, tone down the jaw lines. We're smart now, right? Like, why would that be the order?
We should. Now, so I should also emphasize the large role that straight up bigotry played in the underlying assumptions. Right. So we're talking about 1912, the height of the eugenics movement and the heyday of scientific racism. The working theory at the time was that some large primate made it out of Africa to Europe, and then the sheer geographical superiority of that continent caused them to become superior primates.
That's so stupid.
Right? They evolved into modern white people and then spread and interbred with other early primates, diluting their otherwise perfect whiteness to make all the other peoples of the world. You can really see why conservatives don't want real history taught, right? Anyway, the super smart ape fossil slotted perfectly into the hypothesis and made that way easier to sell.
That's stupid. I learned in intelligent design class that our craniums got bigger because God held in all our sneezes.
You never learned critical face theory. Face theory is so good. Bravo.
Also, just want to point out that even in their own story, the superior Europeans were still running around fucking a bunch of non-human primates.
It wasn't just racism blinding these scientists to the hoax. Nationalism played a big part in it as well. So you have to remember that the whole field of anthropology is pretty young at this point, especially when it comes to human remains, right? So the first known discovery of early human remains was the Gibraltar skull of 1848. Which was a Neanderthal skull discovered in a cave in southern Spain. That's followed by the discovery of, that gives Neanderthals their names, actually. That's the skull cap in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1856. Then you've got Cro-Magnon remains from France in 1868, a Neanderthal skull from Belgium in 1886, a Homo erectus in Java in 1891, and Homo heidelbergensis in 1908, also in Germany. Now, you might have noticed that all the countries I just mentioned weren't England, and that pissed off the British. Right, like tiny-ass little Belgium had early humans. They got shit. So British scientists, desperate to have an early human of their own, embraced what the media dubbed the earliest Englishman. And throughout the entire story, you're going to find that British scientists were way more accepting of the discovery than their American and European counterparts.
Okay, the earliest Englishmen? They were like, look at these skull dimples. This thing wasn't speaking fucking Flemish or French like a fucking savage. This is a British fossil. That's so stupid.
We could see the loss of several teeth to the ancient wine gum if you pay attention. Yeah, this is definitely a British person. We are
Jesus
sure. Yeah.
Christ.
And even though this doesn't really factor into the story, I want to add it because it kind of gives us the trifecta of prejudices.
It's okay. I bullied Heath into ending his essay with hippo facts last week. You're okay to go.
Yeah, no, I'll be fine. So there's also an undercurrent of sexism through this whole story as well, because as the title of this episode attests, this discovery was pretty much always referred to as Piltdown Man, even though it would be impossible to tell from just a skull whether you were dealing with a male or female specimen, especially if it's an unknown species where you don't even have like average sizes to work with. But despite that ambiguity, the wiki points out that every single major newspaper always referred to it as a man, with the single exception of the Daily Express newspaper, which, quote, referred to the discovery as a woman, but only to mock the suffragette movement, of which the Express was highly critical, end quote.
Should have called it Piltdown Fetus in America. You'd never be able to get rid of it, man.
Joke's on them. They paid full price for the rights to that skull. If it had been a woman's skull, they could have gotten it for 70 cents on the dime.
Now, so the chief opponent to Woodward's story was a guy named Arthur Keith, later Sir Arthur Keith. But don't mistake him for the good guy. He was bad too, major proponent of scientific racism. But he wasn't buying the Piltdown remains as Woodward was selling them. He argued that the skull couldn't be real because the lower jaw had human-like molars, but the upper jaw had big ape-like canines. Those things cannot coexist, right? So human molars have to be able to move side to side to chew. That's the whole point of them. And the molars in Piltdown Man showed clear signs of having done that, having been worn down by that side-to-side chewing. That would be literally impossible to do if you had big-ass canines on either side of your mouth. But ultimately,
it just like locks it in. You can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But ultimately, all the aforementioned prejudices lined up against Keith, and he was denounced at the next meeting of the Geological Society by several anthropologists that wrote off his criticisms as nothing more than professional jealousy. So now he wasn't the only voice of opposition. As early as 1913, so less than a year after the finding was announced, David Watterson of King's College in London published an essay in Nature arguing that the sample was an ape mandible and a human skull. French paleontologist Marcellin Boule did the same in 1915, and American zoologist Garrett Smith Miller did the same. It was clear that to really win over the scientific community, Dawson was going to need to find some more fossils. So he did. In 1915, he claimed to have found 3 more skull fragments that were later called the Sheffield Park fragments, They were examined by the president of the American Museum of Natural History, who declared the pieces to be, quote, exactly those which we would have selected to confirm the comparison with the original type, end quote.
That's convenient.
Yeah, should have been another red fucking flag. Right? The exact same guy who found every single relevant fossil when confronted by widespread skepticism about his find finds exactly the fossils that would vindicate him from the most serious criticisms.
No way.
Yeah. So instead of being suspicious, they accepted that as proof of the find's authenticity, and even Keith conceded that it must be real.
Hold on, guys. I also found a fossilized Post-it. It says, to whom it may concern, I keep an old set of upper molars just in my hand, and I grind them against my lower molars to chew so that it all makes love tag.
Okay, I'm not saying I'm disagreeing, but I do want to point out that Noah's personal incredulity meter is most triggered when the thing that should happen is what happens. This is how jaded we've become.
Yeah, it's fair.
So Dawson died a year later in 1916, but his hoax lived on for a fucking while. Keith eventually became one of the discovery's chief proponents, and in July of 1938, he even unveiled a memorial to mark the site where Piltdown Man was first discovered. During the unveiling, he said, quote, so long as man is interested in his long past history, in the vicissitudes which our early forerunners passed through, and the varying fare which overtook them, the name of Charles Dawson is certain of remembrance, end quote. And I don't think he had our show in mind when he said that.
God, these old-timey people fell for everything, man. Anything and everything. Glad we don't fall for hoaxes anymore. Oh, that's my alarm to take my ivermectin to prevent COVID. So let me take a break while I swallow some horse pills here. Gulp.
Gentlemen, it is with the utmost pleasure that I present to you Carciniferous Homeopathic Oofus Boofus, the missing link.
I say.
Yes, Smitherson, my science enemy, because it is old-timey times and we scientists have science enemies.
Yes, we do.
What did you want?
Well, Dobkins, as I examined this so-called specimen of yours, I can't help but notice that the mandible and the cornucopia do not align. There would need to be some sort of cornomandibular joint in place.
Yes, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, Smitherson. For you see,
Hey, I was eating that chicken.
this is an ancient joint thingy that you just said, and that I also found.
Yes. And the naturally occurring tendon traveling from the Vesuvius major down to the Palalala.
Wow, right here.
Hey, those are my glasses.
Very impressive. But you're missing just one important piece, Dobkins. The mandibular credence of the fourth legume.
Yes, yes. Well, the mandibular credence. Well, it's in this species. Well, I see it happens to be invisible.
Oh, you, sir, are quite a scientist. Very well done.
We are the best scientists in the world right now.
You bet your ass we are.
We're back, and before we left, Noah was telling us about scientists that could have probably been fooled by realistic frosting sculptures. Who's going to be the cake boss, Noah? Who's going to be the cake boss?
All right, so like I've already pointed out, plenty of people actually rejected Dawson's interpretation of the find. It didn't make any sense. Even when you added the additional find in 1915, it still didn't make sense. But the tragic downfall here, as much as anything else anyway, is that the critics largely just thought that Dawson was mistaken, not fraudulent. Right, so a lot of people suggested that the two fossils just happened to be in the same place, human skull and an ape jaw in the same ground. But very few suggested that Dawson was deliberately hoaxing the entire scientific community. And that's a lot of the reason it was allowed to stand for so long. Scientists have a really high opinion of themselves, so they're reluctant to think that people within their own hollowed ranks would stoop to something so vulgar and base as forgery. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, also, you got to admit, a lot of recreating animals from fossils amounts to like putting together a Lego set without all the Legos, no picture, and no box. Just like holding up your cobbled together Maybeosaurus parts and then turning them around to see if maybe you're holding an arm or a leg or a rock.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a more than meets the eye kind of thing going on there with them. For example, you can make a woolly mammoth into a cyclops. So for decades, scientists accepted the thing as genuine. And this was super problematic for the science itself, because when it comes to fossilized early human remains, there's a pretty small sample size, especially at this point. I literally listed all of them right in this show. So every new discovery is being viewed through the lens of Piltdown Man from hereafter. And every new discovery is telling a vastly different story. Right, because it turns out that cranial capacity did not drive our divergence from our ape-like ancestors in a twist that nobody at the time was predicting. It turned out that bipedalism was probably the main driver for both. When the first Australopithecus remains were discovered in 1924 and the first Homo erectus remains were found in 1929, much of the scientific elite wrote them off as either aberrations or hoaxes themselves. After all, they were clearly telling a very different story, and the European scientists liked the Eurocentric story better.
Alternative artifacts. Facts.
Look, bipedalism absolutely drove the need for language so that proto-humans could bitch about how much their backs hurt.
Right. True. Of course, there had always been questions about the skull's authenticity, and the detractors kept finding better and better ammunition as these other finds contradicted its narrative and as the science got better in examining it, right? So finally, in 1953, Time magazine published evidence from a number of different prominent scientists proving definitively that Piltdown Man was not just bogus, but a deliberate forgery. New technology, including advancements in microscopy, showed that it was a composite of 3 different primate species. The skull itself came from a medieval human, the lower jaw was from a 500-year-old orangutan jaw, and he had added a few fossilized chimpanzee teeth, I guess, just to spice it up a bit. The bones had been stained with an iron solution and chromic acid to make them appear far older, and the teeth showed file marks that were clearly made so that the specimen would appear to have a more human diet.
Yeah. Also, the steampunk monocle with a leather strap, that didn't quite happen.
Do you think that as he was gluing 3 kinds of monkeys together, Dobbins or whatever the fuck his name is, ever thought to himself, I could just do real science. This is taking a while.
Yeah, you'd think. Now, so as to the identity of the forger, I feel like we've already guessed, but Wikipedia offers up 6 suspects, including Arthur Keith playing the long game. Also, notorious prankster and citation-needed favorite William Horace de Vercole of the Dreadnought hoax fame, who we met way back in episode 33. Also, Sherlock Holmes author and notorious sucker Arthur Conan Doyle is listed as a suspect. He was contemporaneous to all the events. He played golf nearby, and he harbored a huge grudge against the scientific community as a whole for proving that his favorite psychic was a charlatan. But in reality, there's no reason to believe that a hoaxer other than Charles Dawson was involved. Right? I mean, he could have had an accomplice, but he didn't really need one, and it's unlikely that he would have brought in another person into his lie if he didn't have to.
Wikipedia's out here offering us suspects like the end of the first season of Serial. Maybe it was the guy who made all the money and got all the fame, or maybe it was the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes as a fun lark.
Yeah, right. Well, still working his job. So, of course, all of the circumstantial evidence pointed to Dawson. He was the one who stood to gain the most from the discovery. He was the one that the species was named after. He's the one who actually discovered every single relevant fossil. He's also the person, the only person, as it turns out, that didn't have a professional reputation that he could torpedo with this thing. But far more importantly, if not still technically circumstantial, is the fact that we have mountains of other fossils that he faked. Okay, so for decades before he discovered Piltdown Man, he'd made a long string of unlikely discoveries. And when archaeologists perused those, they were able to identify no fewer than 38 hoaxes within that collection. The list of hoaxed fossils in the wiki is pretty incredible, okay? It starts with the teeth of a supposed hybrid reptile mammal that he dubbed Plagiaulix dawsoni, which had been filed down in pretty much the exact same way as Piltdown Man's teeth were. He also had some faked bricks that he claimed were the latest datable find from Roman Britain.
Legos.
A couple forged statues, one of which he said was Roman, another of which he said was Chinese.
But an ancient Chinese statue in Britain.
Yep.
Was it by the fossilized coconuts in East Sussex?
They could grip
Ripped
it
by the husk.
face. And also hiding in the middle of the list of his finds in the collection is something referred to only as the English Channel sea serpent. I couldn't find any more information on that. There was also a weird reference to the shadow figures on the wall of Hastings Castle, which, as near as I can tell, is a reference to a kind of ghost story he told about seeing shadow monsters on the wall of a secret tunnel under some famous castle ruins when he was a kid. I don't fucking know.
Okay, this one is just 5 lion fossils glued together to make a robot. I feel like he's lying.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Council Nobel, you know me for my many and sundry discoveries. Today I present to you that time I saw a ghost.
I looked into this so much, I could not figure out what the fuck that was about. Anyway, the point is that the dude was all kinds of full of shit and had been his entire career. British archaeologist Miles Russell, who examined Dawson's find, said of the collection, quote, Piltdown Man was not a one-off hoax, more the culmination of a life's work, end quote. Other researchers have drawn a number of links between the forgeries in his private collection and the methods used on Piltdown Man, up to and including, by the way, the teeth that were used on the Piltdown Man. He used some of the other teeth from the same fucking orangutan on a different forgery.
Dude, get another 500-year-old orangutan. What
right,
the
you
fuck?
would think, right? Lazy bastard. So it seems super likely that he was the sole perpetrator of the hoax.
It sounds bad, but you get a lot of miles out of the orangutan.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
Yeah,
like
right.
that's-
Yeah. Use
the whole
everything.
orangutan.
It's
Yeah,
good
there was nobody with a
recycling
tear in their
message, yeah.
eye. Not a single person with a tear in their eye.
There you go. Now, there is a tantalizing theory that suggests that a few of the relevant hoaxes were not Dawson's work. I don't know how much credence to give this theory, but it's way too good not to include in the SAC. In addition to the skull fragments and the teeth, they also uncovered a few Stone Age tools in the Piltdown area, and among those tools was a club made from a fossilized elephant bone. But here's the thing. The club in question bears a remarkable resemblance to a cricket bat.
What?
And the idea that the earliest Englishman would be found alongside the earliest cricket bat is a little too on the nose even for Dawson.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Noah, but are we still in England? But now England with elephants and coconuts and Chinese statues?
Yes, yep. Okay, but the theory here is that some of Dawson's critics, unable to dislodge his hypothesis in academic circles, were littering ever more obvious forgeries around the area in hopes that those would get pinned on Dawson and bring down the whole facade.
That's fantastic.
And I should add, by the way, there was just a couple of super duper obvious forgeries that were found and dismissed over the years, including the Maresfield map, the Ashburnham dial, and the Piltdown paleolith.
Okay, that's clearly a graphing calculator that someone replaced the keys with orangutan teeth. Okay, that's
It still says Casio.
it's a TI-85. Okay,
This one's wearing a smartwatch. Okay, it says fossil on the side, but I don't know. That sounds real. I'm still a little skeptical, though.
So the hoax and the scientific community's readiness to accept it at face value left a stain on anthropology that lingered for years, and some might even say lingers to this day. When creationists and other science deniers want to dismiss the entire edifice of scientific study, Piltdown Man is one of their go-to examples. Right? Of course, this ignores the fact that it was other scientists doing better science that ultimately exposed the hoax, but it still serves as an important reminder of the dangers of thinking you're too smart to be fooled and thinking your colleagues are too ethical to lie.
Okay, I work with Eli, so I have never thought that.
Right, not everyone is in equal danger on that one. But there is one other tiny side note that I want to add to the story. It's just a fun little reminder of how one hoaxer can inadvertently expose another. So the year before Time ran the big expose that proved once and for all that Piltdown Man was a hoax, it was cited by none other than L. Ron Hubbard as a phase of biological history that leaves people with the kinds of subconscious memories of trauma that Scientology promises to get rid of. Right? So he made this whole big deal about how obsessions with biting or hiding your teeth or mouth are rooted in our memories of being Piltdown men with these big-ass embarrassing monkey jaws.
This is fantastic.
And despite that being entirely premised on fraudulent bullshit, the book where Hubbard makes that claim has been reprinted by the Church of Scientology 5 times, most recently in 2007.
What? They're still rolling with it?
Sure.
Yes, right. Their current literature still has a, well, if Scientology isn't true, how do you explain Piltdown Man's authenticity sentence in it somewhere? Yes.
Wow.
Piltdown Man, volcano demons, both true. We're nailing it.
Right. Yep.
And if you had to summarize what we learned in one sentence, what would it be?
Science is mostly fake. They don't.
All right, that's fair.
Thank
Are you ready for the quiz?
I absolutely am. Yeah.
All right, Noah, which of the following was the most important skill for a British archaeologist in the early 20th century? A, eugenics. B, phrenology. C, lying. D, Mr. Potato Head.
D would have saved a lot of trouble, but given that the entire essay is proof that the answer is C, I'm going to go with C.
That is correct. It is absolutely giant, big, fat liar. Correct.
All right, Noah. The most incredible thing about all this is imagining that Charles found all this stuff in some imaginary wonder world of never was in East Sussex. What was his favorite place to look for fossils? A, anywhere you can find a lion, a witch, and a wardrobe. B, dig site 9 3/4.
Nice.
C, Charles Dawson's Creek.
So obviously, it's obviously C, Charles Dawson's Creek.
I don't want to wait.
All right, Noah. The Piltdown Man isn't Scientology's only missing link. They've also discovered the Tuong child molester.
What?
Tuong child is one of the missing links that was discovered in China.
Moving on.
B, Neanderthals.
That's a good one. I like that one.
Or C,
I like that one.
they've also discovered the whereabouts of Shelley Miscavige.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yikes.
Oh, God, I'm afraid Andrew's going to be mad at me.
Let's
if
just
I
make
answer
Eli the
C.
winner then. Eli's the winner. Eli's the winner. Eli won. Eli won without a lawsuit. What do you know, Eli? Who goes next
about
week?
Shelley Miscavige next week.
All right, well, for Noah, Tom, Eli, and Heath, I am Cecil. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week, and by then, Tom will be an expert on something else. Between now and then, you can listen to all our other shows. And if you'd like to do something very important, like help keep this show going, you can make a per episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod, or you can leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, check out past episodes, connect with us on social media, or check the show notes. Be sure to check out citationpod.com.
All right. After 14 hours of discovery, we have Ancient Man with his ancient TV set, TV tray, and cup of tea that is still warm.
Yes. But did he take milk or sugar?
Give me like 4 minutes.
Has anyone seen my glasses?
I needed hilts, Cecil, to get their...
Jesus.
I wasn't ready. Okay. Keep that or I'll kill myself. Here we go. I needed pilts. I got it. I'm a professional.
You can do it. You can do it. You got this in you. You got this in you. You got this in you.
I needed pilts to get their down.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely. And parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/getstarted. That's GREENLIGHT.com/getstarted.